Welcome to Dadograms. We live in one of the richest and most technologically advanced countries in human history. We've landed rovers on Mars, mapped the human genome, and built tools that used to belong in science fiction. And yet, when it comes to the most personal arena of all, our health, the experience most Americans actually live is nowhere nearly as sleek as our technology. It's long waits, it's paperwork, it's a maze of referrals and approvals. It's portals that don't talk to each other, phone trees that seem to go on forever, and appointment calendars that seem to punish you for getting sick at the wrong time. Here's the part that bothers me the most. The system often pushes back on the patient because the system is built to control cost and manage volume. It doesn't mean that the people inside of it are bad. It means that the machine has priorities, and making it easy for you and me is most certainly not one of those priorities. So if you take nothing else from this datagram, take this. If you don't actively advocate for your own health, you're going to get less of it. You're going to get less attention, less urgency, less follow-up, less care, and eventually less life. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying that because here in a minute, I'm going to show you what this looks like in real life. And then I'm going to give you a practical way to operate inside this complicated system without getting steamrolled by it. But first, you need to understand what we're actually dealing with. For those of you who believe that we have the best healthcare system in the world, let's start out with some cold facts. The U.S. spends more per person on healthcare than any other nation by a wide margin. And that may sound like a good thing, but if the results don't measure up, then it might not be as good as we think. When you measure outcomes that normal people care about, like life expectancy, how often problems get caught early, how many healthy years of life that we're going to have, we're not leading the pack. In 2023, U.S. life expectancy was 78.4 years. Many peer nations sit higher than that, well into the early 80s. Now, yes, there are some populations here in the United States that kind of drag those averages down. You've got those who have chronic diseases. You've got those subject to violence, addiction, poor access to health care, and the slow grind of poverty. But even when you account for that, the system is still underperforming relative to what we spend. The issue certainly isn't with our doctors or nurses. They're highly trained and deeply committed. The problem is that the system itself is complex, administrative, and fragmented. That creates delays, missed handoffs, and a strange kind of slow motion neglect for people who actually need care. There's a reason experts keep pointing to administrative bloat as a major cost driver. In plain English, too much of our healthcare spending goes to navigating the system instead of improving health. And that complexity doesn't stay theoretical. It shows up in real lives with real consequences. Let me show you what that looks like. One of the biggest structural problems in American healthcare is that the system is far better at treating damage than it is in preventing it. There's a massive difference there, folks. We're very good at reacting once something breaks. We're far less effective at identifying risk early, fixing root causes, and keeping people healthy in the first place. That's not a moral failure by our doctors and nurses. It's an incentives problem baked into how the system operates. Most people don't even realize how thoroughly they've been trained by it. We all go to work bragging about how sick we are, but we're going to power through. I'm sure all of you have done it. I know I have. We treat annual physicals like optional chores. We wait until pain becomes unbearable before we finally go and get seen. And when we do get seen, the system reaches for the quickest lever it can pull, a prescription for your pain, instead of actually trying to fix the cause of the pain. Now contrast that with the way we do it in the military, which I've been part of my entire adult life. In aviation, you don't get casual about health. You can't. A flight physical for us happens every single year on our birth month. And if we miss it, we're grounded with huge consequences. If you get a cold, you don't just shrug it off. Because if your sinuses won't clear at altitude, they can cause serious injury. And I'm talking literally blowing out your sinuses at altitude. So we get evaluated. We get cleared. We don't self-medicate and hope for the best. We don't tough it out and pretend that makes us strong. We get seen, and that's how we stay strong. Here's the key difference most civilians never experience. The military system makes access relatively straightforward. If you need to be seen, you go get seen, because the organization is designed to keep people medically ready and operational. Civilian medicine often feels very different. It can feel like you're trying to get past velvet ropes, with the referrals, authorizations, Networks, scheduling bottlenecks, billing codes, layer after layer of friction, where a normal person can do everything right and still lose momentum and fall through the cracks. Which leads to the real lesson. When the system isn't built to shepherd you forward, you have to become the shepherd yourself. Let me tell you a story that finally drove this home for me, and it's a brutal story. A hard-working truck driver that I'm familiar with was hand-cranking the landing gear on a trailer when something went wrong. He wasn't being reckless. He was just cranking away, and suddenly the strain caused his bicep to detach from the bone. Seriously, folks, can you even imagine that? Your bicep, that big muscle right here, detaching from the bone. No doubt a bad day for him. As it turned out, this wasn't the first time it had happened. After the original injury, his doctor warned him that if it ever happened again, he had roughly 7 days to get it successfully repaired. After that, the odds dropped fast that they could do anything meaningful with it. Now guess when this happened? That's right, just before Christmas. When he called to make an appointment, they told him they couldn't get him in until after the holidays, after the first of the year, the first couple weeks of January. And he accepted that. He didn't push, he didn't escalate, he didn't explain. Instead, he just assumed that if something truly urgent needed to be happening, someone inside the system would flag it and move it along. That assumption cost him. So when he finally showed up to his appointment in January, he was told the appointment had been canceled. They said that they tried to call him, but he never got the message. Weeks had gone by, the 7-day window was long gone, and now he was being offered another appointment. Next month, in February. So we'll have to see how that all turns out for him. But meanwhile, he's on workman's comp, unable to drive, and desperate to get back to work. He doesn't even care about his arm anymore. He just wants to drive. That's a story about a system where urgency gets buried inside the process, and the person with the most at stake often has the least control unless they actively fight for it. Now, I know how spoiled this may make me sound, but I come from a world where if I needed a doctor, I got one. Like that. In my last command in the Navy, we had about 12 active duty personnel, and one of them was our flight doc. His office was right down the hall from mine, and if I ever needed anything, I just walked down the hall, knocked on the door, and I got seen. It was that easy. And that's pretty much how it works in the military. But out here, even with decent insurance, the civilian world can feel like you're dealing with, well, a machine that doesn't move quickly enough unless you push it. And sometimes, not even then. These things may be new to a lot of you, or maybe they're not. Maybe some of you've seen this firsthand. If you've ever had an appointment canceled and no one told you, or you've been stuck on a phone line for longer than 45 minutes just trying to get basic care, hit that thumbs up. Not because it's fun, but because it proves you've seen this machine up close. Now, if you think this happens only with complicated injuries, wait until you hear this next one. This one was about a tooth infection. Now, I've got a family member who struggled for years with problems that tend to stack on top of each other. Unstable work, unstable insurance, unstable health. I've talked about his challenges more than a few times in Dadograms. He's always got issues, and it's always tempting, very tempting, when he's describing the latest issue to just shrug and say, well, you should have handled that earlier. I mean, after all, everyone knows that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? But the more I listen to him, the more I realize how shallow that reaction is. How exactly is he supposed to handle it? What system is he supposed to use? With what access? With what time and money? For me, to see a doctor, I walked down the hall and I knocked on a door. For him, it's not even remotely that simple. When you're living close to the edge, financially, medically, and emotionally, the system doesn't meet you halfway. A lot of the times, it doesn't meet you at all. So here's the nightmare he's been dealing with. He developed a dental abscess, a rotten tooth that needed to come out. Now, before anyone just waves that off and thinks, oh, well, whatever, that's just dental, understand this. Infections in your mouth hurt like hell, and they don't politely just stay in your mouth. Left unattended, they can spread into your bloodstream, trigger serious complications, and in some cases, put people in the hospital or even the cemetery. A tooth can absolutely become a life-threatening problem. So he finally gets an appointment at a free clinic. 9 months in the future. Imagine carrying that kind of pain in the background of your life for almost a year, counting the weeks, telling yourself, Just hang on, relief is almost there. When the day finally arrived, he was actually excited. He shows up, the person behind the window greeted him, and then told him, almost, just casually, that the dentist he was scheduled with had quit 5 months earlier and his appointment had been canceled. Nobody called, nobody emailed, nobody followed up. They just asked if he'd like to reschedule. Well, obviously, yes, he would. And guess what? The next available appointment was, that's right, 9 months in the future. What the hell? And that's the kind of moment that makes a normal person want to start flipping over chairs. Not because they're unstable, but because it exposes the deeper problem. The system becomes so process-driven that it starts prioritizing internal scheduling over human urgency and basic common sense. I'm not telling you this to make you cynical. I'm telling you this to make you alert. Stories like this are why people quietly give up, normalize worsening health, and eventually show up in the emergency room with something that could have been handled much, much earlier if the system actually moved and if they'd known how to push it. So the real question is simple. What do you actually do about this? And before I give away the practical answer, we have to address the invisible force underlying most of the delays, the confusion, and the sorry, this isn't covered surprise. Insurance. Yes, insurance matters, and I hate it too. It's a second language and it shouldn't be as complicated as it is. But the truth is, the whole system runs on insurance rules. And if you don't understand a few basics, what's covered, what requires authorization, what's in network, well, you're just stepping into a gunfight with a pocket knife and you're going to lose. If you don't have the time or the patience to learn the language, do what smart people do. Bring a translator. For me, in all seriousness, I can't make heads or tails of the insurance process. Thankfully, my wife can, so I take Krista with me anytime I have to deal with insurance issues. For you, it might be a spouse, or it might be a friend who's been through this, or yes, even using ChatGPT to translate insurance gobbledygook into plain English before you make a decision. If you have the paperwork, take a picture, put it in ChatGPT, and ask it to summarize what you see. It's pretty damn good at what it does. And the reason? Because confusion in healthcare isn't just frustrating. Confusion costs time, confusion costs money, and sometimes confusion costs outcomes. Now here's the mind shift underneath all of this. One of the strangest things about American culture is that we teach advocacy everywhere except where it matters most. We'll fight for our kids in school. We'll argue with a bank over a fee. We'll research the hell out of a $700 grill like we're running a NASA procurement system. But when it comes to our own health, where the stakes are literally the quality of our life or our lifespan, people suddenly get polite and passive. They wait for referrals. They wait for someone to tell them it's urgent enough. They tolerate delays without pushing back. They assume the system will remember them and call them when it's time. But the system isn't a person. It doesn't remember you like a neighbor would. It's a machine managing volume. If you fall through the cracks, the machine doesn't feel bad. It just keeps moving. So the rule has to change inside of your own head. When something feels wrong, you take it seriously and you reach out early. And when someone tells you, just wait, you ask the simple question, what's the medical risk if I wait? What could get worse if I do? Is there a real reason this can't happen sooner? And clarity is how you protect yourself in a system that isn't designed to protect you automatically. And that leads to the next instinct that you need, one that I can't drive home strongly enough. Learn the difference between treating pain and fixing the cause. When one of our kids had our wisdom teeth pulled out, they gave us a giant bottle of Percocet. That's right, an opioid. Just in case the pain was just too much for her. We didn't want them. We said we didn't want them, but they prescribed them anyway, because that's what the system routinely does. In reality, she took 1/2 of one of those pills on the first day because the pain was pretty intense. After that, Tylenol handled everything perfectly fine. Sure, the pain she was dealing with was real, but it was expected and it was temporary. Those opioids aren't a solution. They are a risk, and we disposed of them properly because we weren't about to trade short-term comfort for long-term danger. Now, this wasn't just a parental decision. My wife and I weren't dictating this. That's how our whole entire family thinks. We don't lean on pain relief. We lean on fixing the cause of the pain. That's the mindset I want you to adopt. Don't panic about pain, and don't ignore what it's telling you either. Find out what's causing it and fix the cause. Use medication wisely, not reflexively. And if the answers don't make sense, get a second opinion, because your body is not the place to just hope things work out. So here's the takeaway. If you don't advocate for your own health, you will lose pieces of it over time. Not always dramatically, not always in the moment, but through delay, confusion, and quiet neglect that compounds. You don't need to distrust your doctors or your nurses, but you do need to stop outsourcing responsibility. You need to understand what's happening, why it matters, and what comes next. And you need to be persistent enough to make the system respond to you. Because healthcare, for better or worse, isn't about customer service, it's customer self-advocacy. And zoom out for a minute, because this isn't just a health lesson. It's the same mindset that lets people win in every serious area of life. Paying attention early, asking hard questions, refusing to go passive when the stakes are high, and taking responsibility instead of hoping the system saves you. So here's my challenge to you this week. Do one thing a real health advocate would do. Schedule the physical you've been pushing off. Confirm the appointment that's been pending, and keep confirming it. Don't show up and just be surprised when it got canceled. If something feels off with your health, ask what the risks are if you wait. And then, of course, don't wait. Actually go in and get seen. And finally, any answer that you get from a medical professional that just doesn't feel right, get a second opinion. And of course, translate the insurance language before it traps you. Because time isn't just money in healthcare. Time is tissue. Time is function. Time is whether the fix stays simple or becomes irreversible. In America today, your strongest health ally, the only guaranteed health champion you have, is you. And that's what I have for you in this Dadogram. Good luck out there.